going, oh gee, that really doesn't feel nice, or I might even see double. So prism is significant. So there is prism in all lenses as well, which is why we actually want to fit the lenses to the optical centres, or we want to actually fit the lenses well in the frame and have it equal between the two eyes, because you don't want to be inducing prism. That's why we measure a PD, for instance, so that we don't have this high horizontal prism induced by the fact that the lenses are sitting out here or here, which is one of the problems with the magnifiers that people get. They just put in, and usually they make them the cheapest way they can, so they obviously put the prism, they put the lens usually fairly sort of centred, so for most people they're inducing quite a lot of prism when they read them, which is obviously why it's not as good for their eyes. Okay, so that gets a little bit talking about prisms, and we should come back and readdress prism a bit later, but it gives you a sense of, okay, the lenses have a prismatic effect when the light's coming in. So if we have a particularly, get rid of all of that, so you saw how that bent light. Now, some lenses, diamonds for instance, you'd think diamonds would be great things to make glasses out of. That should be terrible, because they have a really, really low Abbey number. Well, what's an Abbey number? Well, an Abbey number is just, again, a reference of what we make about how good it is at bending light. The higher the Abbey number, the better it is with a lens for it to take the light and bend it without creating chromatic aberration. Okay, technical term, colour fringing. Prismatic effect, so how good is it making the light comes through as a beam of light, and how much does it stay as one beam of light and not a whole heap of little tiny beams that are separated with all the different colour spectrums and creating that fan of coloured effect. And obviously when you're looking at things, it's all very great to look at a diamond and go, oh, isn't that pretty? But when you're actually wanting to see the world, you want to see that if it's black on white, you want to see black on white. You don't want to see black on a whole heap with a fringe of colour, because obviously once that's a whole heap of objects together, suddenly things look blurry and not clear, because nothing's got a distinct edge on it. It's all got colour fringing on the edges of it. And so for instance, what we like to try and do here is we always try and use materials that have got a good Abbey number. There's a material out there that's very commonly used, which is a 159 material. You guys will have heard about that, and it's called polycarbonate. We've been mentioned in our guide.
He did nice.
And it's one of the most commonly optical made materials. It's often used in sunnies and wrap sunnies. And it has some very, very easy sellable points. It's impact resistant. It's about 10 times more impact resistant than standard plastic. So, you know, the 1.53 is about 8 times, this is about 10 times, so it's more impact resistant. It's very, very light, it has a low specific gravity. 159, it's obviously got a reasonably high index, it's almost 1.6, it's not quite, so it's, you know, it's quite light and it's quite thin. It's very light and it's moderately thin. And so it's got some good features. What it does have as terrible feature is it has a very low Abbey number. And basically low Abbey number, it has an Abbey number of about 29.
And yet a 1.6 has a 41.
41, exactly. So, and to put it in terms, 1.5 has an Abbey number of 58.
1.4, yes.
So, which means this material, as far as a material for keeping objects crisp, clear, whatever, if you want the best possible clarity, it's that. And in fact, glass has got an Abbey number of, I think, closer to 65 or something. I can't remember exactly, but it's a little bit higher than the plastic. So as far as getting so if they're making the absolute best telescopes they can make and all the rest of them, they don't make them out of plastic, they make them out of ground glass, because the optics are superior. Not a lot superior, but for the features of making glass, where they're, for glasses, for spectacles, where they're not safe, extremely heavy, we can't, you know, telescope you can mount in a mount on in a metal frame and, you know, and put a cement base to hold it all up. You can't do that with your glasses, you know. So for spectacles, glass isn't a particularly great material to use, because it's not safe and because it's very heavy and all the rest of it. But optically it's great, you know, all the precision telescopes and all the rest of it will tend to use glass in their lenses, okay, and those are really big ones, they'll use glass. because it's got a really, really good Abbey number. Again, so what it's basically saying is it keeps everything nice and crisp and clear without colour fringing on the edges of things. Whereas obviously something like that doesn't. If we just go back and we use our example of, can you tell me, if you read off the sheet there, what is the Abbey number of a 1.67?
31.
31, which is a little bit better than that, but not a shed load better. What about a 1.6? I think you'd already told me.
41.
41. It's good. 41's really
Better than
not.
31, isn't it?
Yeah, not going to show virtually
So the higher
any.
the Abbey number, the better? Is that what
Yeah, the higher the Abbey number, the better. And so what about a 153?
43.
43. So 43 is pretty good. 41's really good. So, as far as material, so you can see, depending on what value you want, things have different things. And there are some materials that just generally tick a lot of boxes, and there are some materials that don't tick as many. So our 167 at 31 is great if someone really has a high prescription and they want it to look cosmetically good. But we may actually find that, and you'll see that listed, if their main criteria is they're a truck driver and they just want the absolute best clarity at night and they want everything to look really, really good, you might be better to say, hey, we'll make sure we select the right frame so it's going to be comfortable. It will show a little bit more at the edge, but let's go for a 1.6 index because it's pretty light, pretty thin, not as thin as this 1.67 one, but optically it just gives you that little, a few percent extra better, clearer vision and less likely to have a little fringing on the lights or things like that. It's going to give you the best possible clarity. Would we go and put a truck driver in 159? Drives at night, interstate, got a fairly high script. And what I should say too is, the higher the script, the more this becomes significant. So hence using this 1.5 material in plano sunglasses as a non-prescription. Sunning doesn't tend to be an issue, and in fact a lot of sunglasses use polycarbonate, a lot of safety glasses because it's very cheap to manufacture. It's not very good with scratch resistance. It's other material that polycarbonate we don't like is it's not very stable material. Lots of chemicals, household chemicals, acetone, all sorts of things will actually dissolve the lens. And again, if it's not very good with the coating because it's actually, while it's very impact, it flexes a lot. And it flexes, if you imagine you've got all these nice hard coatings on the top to try and stop the lens scratching, what happens when the lens starts to flex? Well, the coatings are all a bit firmer than the material, and those materials end up with lots of stress fractures and cracks, which we call crazing, but effectively they're stress fractures and cracks. Or again, if they get thermal shock, okay, they go from hot to cold pretty quickly, you'll get stuff. So it's not a very stable material. So we don't like it for that particular material, and in our practice, we almost never use it because of that. It's the most common thinner lens used in all the corporates because it's cheap. It's easy to sell, 10 times more impact resistant, UV inhibited, lighter, thinner.
But
Sounds good.
Just not that great. It's not
But
as
if you've got a moderate prescription, it's going to make your vision blurry.
Yeah.
It's going to fall apart after 12 months or so or less, and it'll have a fairly high rate of the coatings falling apart and becoming a problem. And don't get anywhere near any household chemicals with it if you're a cleaner or anything else, because you'll probably destroy your lenses even quicker still.
it's not very versatile.
So for us, we just think there are so much better materials on the market to use, but all the major corporates and all our major competitors, when they talk about they're using their light and thin lenses, they're talking about polycarbonate. Some of the probably other big corporates that are a little bit more reputable will also have options for these other materials as well, but the main first upgrade for people, I think we'll better go that little bit thinner for you, that's where they go.
So no good for